Hello everyone, my name is Masaki Nakashima. I am part of the Customer Success Architects team in Informatica, and today we'll be working on a demo on how to leverage IDMC REST API capabilities for automation for creating mapping tasks, given a control table in Snowflake. So this demo will take you step by step on how to implement automation leveraging IDMC fully parameterized mappings. A Python script as the main module, and using Snowflake for creating a control table for this approach. So what benefits can you get from this content? Well, by leveraging IDMC REST API capabilities, you can speed up development times by automating mapping task creation that uses a fully parameterized mapping. That meaning reducing the time to onboard new data sets. So for this demo, we have based on a CDI template that is called replicate data incrementally to new target. So you'll find this item in the CDI console when you're trying to create a new mapping. So, and we used it for creating a Snowflake to Snowflake integration, which doesn't leverage any advanced PD or advanced pushdown optimization, aka SQLLT. But templates can refer to any integration pattern needs based on what you have. You need Oracle to Snowflake, Salesforce to GBQ, all the capabilities that a mapping can help you with. So this can be defined by your use cases and configuration needs. Of course, this doesn't include that part, but you can have parameterized settings for advanced pushdown optimization, enabling the truncate unload strategies. You can manage schema change handling needs. Also, if you want it to be dynamic, you want to apply any changes in the source in the target directly. So this demo leverages a Python script, which can run in a secure agent, given that you have a Python runtime engine installed. So this script performs the following tasks. So firstly, it's going to connect to IDMC org, leveraging login B2 API. Then based on the retrieval of this login B2 is going to create mapping tasks given the parameters from Snowflake control table. It's going to leverage job B2 API to trigger the mapping tasks. And it's going to trigger previously created mapping tasks based on a flag that we're going to establish. It's going to update the control table to include FRS UID for created mapping tasks. And lastly, it's going to close connections. So moving on to our next slide, or business use case. So the following applies for what we'll see in today's demo. We're going to have requirement to speed up development process to quickly onboard new data sets. We're going to have Snowflake incremental loads integration based on provided load timestamp or last modified date at all sources. This demo bases on a Snowflake to Snowflake integration and add new columns or calculate new fields based on existing fields in sources. And lastly, given a control table, identify new mapping tasks that will require to be created versus running existing automated interfaces based on process flag. Then next slide. So this demo will show you how to create mapping tasks using Python script, which will read metadata parameters from a Snowflake control table and create mapping tasks for all entries. After creating them, script will trigger them asynchronously, and lastly will close all connections before completing the scripts. So few limitations. Fully parameterized mapping is required to be built beforehand. For this sample, we're going to provide you one asset that can be imported into your IDMC org as part of the full exercise demo. Then in terms of this exercise, it considers metadata for MCT creation, the following elements that are going to come from Snowflake. So we have source connection, database and schema, source table name, source filter, target connection table name, CDC field, which is the field to be used for incremental loads, expression fields, if there's any new columns to be added, active flag, so the script will only consider when this flag is equals y, and then process flag to be considered by the script only when is equals n. So in the next slide, we're going to have an end-to-end diagram. So this is more of a detailed view on the end-to-end process. So we can see the script starts on leveraging the libraries for the Snowflake connector. So it's going to retrieve the list of sources and targets and other parameters we have established. Then at the core of the program is going to retrieve an IC session ID by running a request to the login v2 to IDMC org. Then the next step is going to create the mapping tasks based on those input parameters. Then on the creation of the mapping task, when it's successful, it's going to give us back an FRSG ID, which will be used to trigger those mapping tasks. And then lastly, it's going to update back to the Snowflake table with the FRSG ID, update a couple more parameters. And then on the last part on the right, is going to just disconnect from Snowflake. He's going to close the connection and then IDMC logout v2 for killing that IC session ID so it doesn't remain active. Moving on. So here's the setup and the steps to follow. So as part of our setup, we're going to download all contents from KB link shared in the description section of this video. We have to make sure Python 3+ is installed where the script will be executed. Manually run pip install Snowflake connector Python. So this library is or extension is available to the Python engine. Then we're going to require using Postman or a similar API client tool. Then we're going to require to use user credentials for IDMC, user credentials for Snowflake. So on the steps to follow, we're going to have create control table in the Snowflake environment, and then we're going to insert few records to this same table. Then we're going to import the MCT relational incremental template.sep into our IDMC org. Then we're going to use API client tool to retrieve few attributes needed to be replaced on our Python script. And lastly, we're gonna run the script. So without further ado, let's move on to our demo. As a first step, we have create control table in our Snowflake environment. So here I am on my Snowflake account. So this is the script that has been shared. So I'm just going to run the part for creation of my table. Then I have a few sample records here for the demo purpose that I'm gonna insert. Then I'm just gonna run a quick select. So this is the attributes that we were mentioning previously on the PPT slides. So FRSUID is loaded null because this is gonna be used by the automation script. ID has to be unique. So I have my source connection. You can see here I have defined my source connection ID from IDMC. So wherever the case you have, if you want to use source connection names, it can be possible. it's just a matter of adding an extra call API to, based on the name, retrieve this ID, because ultimately what the mapping task creation requires is going to be this attribute. So we have source database schema, source table name. I have my source filters, which in this case for all of them are the same. I have my target connection IDs. I have my target table names that I want to define. You notice here, this is the database and the schema being part of the table name. That's how it just manages. And then the CDC field, what is the field that I want to use? And then I'm just applying it to char. So it makes sure that it goes as a string. In the case of date times handling, and then for the expression fields, I'm adding few of them. In this case, it's info load timestamp, which is the session start time, then an info user, which corresponds to my name. And this is where you will define the rules if you want to add any calculation based on existing fields on the sources. So active flag is equals Y, but the last one. So I want the script to ignore this one, and then process flag is all N. I have my last process date, which is null, and then added by just as audit field. So we have completed step 1. Moving on to step 2, import or zip package into our IDMC org. So I'm just gonna log into my IDMC org. And then I'm going to click on explore. Then for this demo purpose, I have created this specific folder. So all that it requires is this structure with mapping task and mappings. So this is recommended standard. And then we're gonna hit on import. Then we're gonna load our file, select our file. Then it's one MCT and one mapping. So it's gonna create both objects. Then my target project, you can select if you have a different folder name. Then my connection name, you can select yours. And then runtime environment, make sure you change it to the one that you will be using. So in this case, I don't have to update anything. I'm just going to hit import. We're gonna validate import was successful. And then we should be able to see new mapping created here, and then a mapping task which was created here. So we're gonna jump on into our API client tool. So I'm gonna bring up my Postman. So this is just the login B2 user API, requires this type of body. It's a post request. So I'm just gonna hit send. So give me back my IC session ID. Then now I'm gonna use this URL for API v2 mapping task name. So it's gonna give me all my details for this MCT that it was just imported. And now we are ready to start updating our script. So I'm gonna bring up my PyCharm console. So this is a script that is shared on the KB link. So we're gonna have few steps that were included. So step 1 is gonna be update Snowflake connection parameters. So for now, I'm just gonna skip right to the part where it's saying global B container, because this is one that we can retrieve from IDMC directly. So this is the first one that I'm gonna change. So we can come back to IDMC, and once we're sitting in the folder that we want for the mapping task to be created, we can just grab this ID, and then I'm gonna put it into line 40. So I'm gonna search for line 40, update it. Then I'm going to skip update snowflake connection because of privacy, right? So in here, here's all the attributes for the connection that are required. Then is the IDMC credentials, nothing but the username and the password. So what else is here? After updating Snowflake and IDMC, we have to update our MCT payload attributes. So container ID we just did, then global mapping ID. We can go back to our Postman and then just fetch that specific attribute from the mapping task that it was created as part of the import. So this is going to be line 42. Skipping to line 42, we're gonna update that value. Then the next one is org ID. So we're gonna go back to Postman, gonna retrieve our org ID, and then update it on line 139. Here it is. Then I'm gonna get back up to my script. So we have the agent ID. So this also can be brought from Postman. So we have the agent ID. Grab this value, go back to our script, update line 143. And lastly, also the runtime environment. We're gonna paste it. So in the case that you want to parameterize these attributes, it can be also done on the Snowflake control table. So for purpose of the demo, I mean, we are just focusing on showing the capabilities. So we haven't included this part of the as part of the parameters to be coming from Snowflake, but it can be done. You're willing to put some time into it. So what is next step? So pip install, I already have my Snowflake connector available in my environment. So we already created our entries for the Snowflake control table. So we should be good to run our script. And so we're gonna just trigger our script. As you can see, there was an IC session ID was granted by IDMC org, and then start a section for start of new mapping task creation, since the records were new. And then it's starting the mapping task. So mapping task 1, mapping task 2, mapping task 3. And then it's marking end of new mapping task creation. So it has another section for start of existing mapping task creation and end of existing mapping task creation. So this refers to the existing ones that were already there. So we're gonna head back to our data integration. On the jobs section, we're gonna be able to see mapping tasks are running. On our explore, I'm gonna go to folder, and I see the new mapping task that was created. So we're gonna give it a couple seconds here to complete. In the meanwhile, we can check on our Snowflake. Our table should have been updated. So we have our FRSG IDs for the mapping tasks that were created. And then towards the right side, we're gonna have our process flag equals Y, which means it was processed, and then our last process date. Going back to our data integration, have records that were loaded. and only one is pending to run, so it's completed. And we can double check the data. So we're gonna have, for example, this table. So I have all my source existing elements, and then towards the right side, I'm gonna have the data fields that I added as part of my transformation. So for load timestamp, info user, and info MCT name. So now as a second part, I'm gonna insert a couple records more into each table with our current timestamp. Because if we check on our mapping task logs, we're gonna be able to see that the Bmax value is being kept as of maximum on the data that it was brought. So inserting the data, then I'm gonna update my flags equals n. So it's gonna look like this. It's gonna have the first GID, but now my process flag is equals n. So I'm gonna go back to my script, and I'm gonna rerun. So you see for the section for new mapping task creation, it completely skipped out. It didn't identify any new mapping task or any new assets to be created. It went directly to start of existing mapping task creation, which is meaning to run, and then it triggered opportunity, account, and contact. So if we go back to our IDMC org, we're gonna see that they are running again. So the run ID is the same that it was as part of our response. So it's gonna match our instance names. Ultimately, the goal is going to be to see here 2 records were moved and our update timestamp was updated again. So we're going to refresh. More. And let's hit refresh once again. So it has completed, 2 records has been moved, max value has been updated. So this was all the material per the demo. Just few notes on the Python script. In here, all these parameters can be also be brought from Snowflake control table. It was the purpose of the demo was to show you the capabilities. As well, you can add some handling for schema changes for any given mapping tasks. If you don't want to have the same strategy for all the ones created during the automation, and so on. So lastly, on the resource slide, so we have our REST API reference, which is our docs.informatica.com. The KB scripts and assets download link provided in the description of this video. There's a help aid for installing PyCharm, and then also for installing Postman. Thank you everyone for your time. Hope you find this useful, and have a nice day.